Not every mountain welcomes those who dare to climb it. Some rise above endless clouds like stairways to heaven, while others hide deadly cliffs, razor-sharp ridges, and weather that can change in an instant. Towering granite peaks, sacred summits, and breathtaking landscapes have inspired travellers for centuries, yet many of these mountains demand courage as much as admiration. Beyond their incredible beauty lie stories of survival, ancient legends, and challenges that only a few have conquered. Today, the journey leads to the most beautiful and dangerous mountains in China, where every summit offers unforgettable views and every step reminds you to respect the power of nature. Breaking through a sea of mist, Fanjingshan appears with a massive rock pillar split in two, supporting two temples and an arched bridge high above the ground. The greatest challenge is that the top of the pillar has almost no flat ground, so even the small courtyards had to be carved directly from the edge of the cliff. Without machinery, ancient builders carried every brick and wooden beam across slopes close to 90 degrees to construct the temples on a pillar more than 328 feet high. Strong winds at the summit also forced them to use copper roof tiles weighing many tons to anchor the temple roofs and prevent the structures from being blown away. During the changing seasons, the elevation divides the landscape into three clear layers, with white snow at the summit, red maple leaves on the slopes, and green forests in the valley below. Low, yet in only 15 minutes, clouds can rise from the deep valley and cover the entire summit, making the two temples and the bridge disappear from view. Just by leaving the foot of Mount Ma and climbing higher, visitors pass through several types of climate, from the warm valleys below to the cold summit at 9,843 feet. Along the way, trees, moss, and vines cover many narrow paths, making the ground darker and wetter than the outside areas. Higher up, mist appears for more than 300 days each year, covering many valleys and making the Buddha light appear above the sea of clouds. Behind this mountain scenery, is an ancient rock base that was lifted over a very long time, forming a mountain mass that stands out from the surrounding area. Because of the height and cold air, water flowing down the cliffs in winter can freeze into white strips along the mountainside. In the end, the climb to the summit still passes through more than 60,000 stone steps carved into the mountain, with many sections facing both the sea of clouds and deep ravines. Lodgen Mountain. Honoured as the #1 immortal mountain in the mortal realm, Laojun Mountain takes the form of tens of thousands of giant granite swords piercing straight into the highest clouds. When night falls, the peak transforms into a spectacular observatory, where the brilliant halos from the structures merge with the Milky Way draped across the sky. This heavenly illusion becomes even more intense at an altitude of 7,274 feet, as canyons plunging over 3,281 feet deep constantly absorb moisture to raise a dense ocean of clouds that swallows the earthly world. Hidden behind that surreal beauty is a brutal geological process, as the mountain mass had to endure 1.9 billion years of relentless weathering and erosion to form this magnificent wonder. The pinnacle of madness lies in the solid gold-plated bronze palaces, firmly pinning their foundations onto 3 jagged, narrow peaks, right on the edge of a bottomless abyss, to reject all limits of gravity. In the dense green subtropical forest, Mount Danxia stands out with the purplish red colour of its sandstone, formed as iron inside the rock core oxidised over time. That red colour is not only on the surface, but sinks deep into the stone structure, making the whole mountain range look as if it is rusting from the inside. At sunset, minerals inside the sandstone absorb and reflect the last light of the day, making the cliffs glow like giant burning coals. That fiery scene is why the name Danxia is linked to the meaning of red sunset clouds, similar to images once described in ancient Chinese poetry. Few people would expect that this red sandstone mass was once buried under the bottom of a large water basin about 140 million years ago, before being lifted and eroded into mountains. Thanks to that special geological history. Now, Danxia became an important representative of the red sandstone landform, recognised by UNESCO as a World Natural Heritage Site. Wugong Mountain. Without vertical cliffs, this mountain still stays in climbers' memory with endless green ridges that look dreamlike but quietly drain their strength. When clouds rise from the valleys and wrap around the hills, this place becomes more than a trekking route, turning into a test of will between gentle beauty and desperate exhaustion. The trail runs along a narrow ridge with grassy slopes falling on both sides, making each step feel soft, like moving over waves of grass, but unstable, like walking on a blade. From an old goat herder's path, Knife Edge Ridge has become a trekking symbol, where endless slopes force climbers to face their own limits. At nearly 6,293 feet high, alpine grasslands of more than 100,000 acres spread out like a giant green sea, creating a rare landscape high in the mountains. Lishan Giant Buddha, China. Like a being waking from a red sandstone cliff, this 233-foot Leshan Giant Buddha appears with majesty where three fierce rivers meet. As people follow the steep paths down toward the Buddha's feet, the contrast becomes overwhelming between the glowing red stone, the deep green forest, and the rushing water below. The secret that has helped the great statue survive for more than 1,300 years lies in 1,021 stone hair, buns, and a hidden drainage system behind the ears and robe folds. This is the tallest stone Buddha statue in the world, carved directly into the mountain cliff, making the whole mountain feel like the body of a giant spiritual work. From far away, the surrounding mountain range also looks like a giant sleeping Buddha, while the Leshen giant Buddha sits exactly at the heart of that shape. In the middle of a dry, cold plateau, Mustar Atta appears like a huge block of ice standing out under a wide and empty sky. Because of that massive look, generations of nomads have called this place Mustar Atta, meaning the father of ice mountains. Thanks to its unusually gentle slopes, this mountain has become a place for extreme ski climbing, where skilled people test themselves on the slopes above 24,000 feet. Unlike many sharp mountain peaks, this 24,760-foot mountain has a large dome shape, like a silver shield turned upside down under the sky. Below the white ice, the dry golden grassland creates a strong contrast, making the scene simple but hard to forget. Still, its huge height makes this place dangerous because thin air can quickly drain the strength of anyone who goes there. Daliang Mountains, China. Appearing like a giant maze of sharp peaks and deep chasms, the Daliang Mountains are so violently broken that the whole region feels almost impossible for humans to cross. For many generations, people here had to move up and down on ladders to heaven, woven from vines and branches and fixed against the cliff face. There was even a time when children as young as 6 had to risk their lives on cliffs higher than about 2,500 feet just to reach school. Around them rise peaks above 13,000 feet that plunge sharply into low valleys, creating rock walls that are nearly vertical and extremely dangerous. That isolation helped the core of this region preserve a closed slave society until 1956. Later, to replace that deadly route, people hauled more than 40 tons of steel up the mountain and fixed them into a staircase of 2,556 steps along the cliff, turning the old path into a life saving feat that still looks terrifying. Mianshan is shocking because many temples were not built on the ground, but cling directly to steep vertical cliffs. In the past, this place was linked to the origin of the Qingming festival 2,600 years ago, after the story of an official who died with his mother in a fire because he refused to surrender. Building the temples was very dangerous because many workers lost their lives while using ropes to pull large bronze bells up near the cliff edge. Nature also creates an unbelievable scene here, with underground water channels passing through limestone and bursting out as waterfalls in the middle of the cliff. During the journey, you also have to cross wooden planks less than 3 feet wide, right above a drop of 984 feet. Although it was once heavily destroyed, the entire cliff hanging complex was restored after a billionaire spent hundreds of millions of dollars rebuilding it. Flaming mountains erguendo-se de forma árida no meio do deserto, esta gigantesca cadeia de arenito rejeita completamente a beleza pacífica e se revela como um incinerador geológico brutalmente mortal. Sob o sol do meio-dia, o ar quente que sobe intensamente distorce a luz, fazendo a paisagem tremer com violência, como a boca de uma fornalha de fundição prestes a explodir. Quando o pôr do sol chega a todas as encostas, reflete a luz brilhante e arde visualmente como um enorme carvão em brasa recém-tirado das cinzas. A severidade atinge o auge quando a chuva de menos de 3 centímetros por ano é instantaneamente fervida e evaporada por completo, antes mesmo de conseguir nutrir o solo. Todas as tentativas de construir templos desmoronam diante do calor que destrói materiais combinado com o fluxo de ar seco pronto para drenar a respiração de qualquer pessoa que se aproxime. Yandang Mountain is striking because of its vertical cliffs, which are actually the remains of a large volcano that erupted about 120 million years ago. At night, moonlight shines on the cracked cliffs, making many rocks appear like strange mountain shadows in the dark. During the day, just by changing your viewing angle, a rock that looks like an eagle can also appear like a pair of lovers. Besides the rocks, this place also has a waterfall about 623 feet high, but the wind turns the falling water into white mist before it reaches the bottom. Hidden deep inside the cliffs are multi-story temples placed by ancient people inside hollow spaces in volcanic rock. Although the terrain is dry and steep, a lake on the mountaintop once drew wild geese back every autumn, and that image gave the place the name Yandang. Thick clouds often cover the middle of the mountain, leaving only the granite peaks of Huangshan rising like islands in the sky. Beneath that scene is a granite mass formed from cooled magma very long ago in Earth's history. Over millions of years, ice, storm, and changing temperatures wore that rock down into cliffs that stand close to 90 degrees. On those cliffs, many pine trees still grow from narrow cracks, grip the rock with their roots, and stretch toward the edge for sunlight. Most unusually, this place can get as cold as 12 degrees Fahrenheit, but hot springs still flow under the mountain all year, creating a strange contrast between ice and warmth. To see the full view of Huangshan, visitors must walk along narrow stone paths close to the cliff, with many sections looking straight down into deep ravines below. A rock arch 427 feet high opens through the cliff of Tietmen Mountain, formed after a cave collapse in the year 263, creating the feeling of a path hanging in the sky. To get close to this area, visitors take a cable car route 24,459 feet long, gliding past the cliffs before reaching the high clouds. After leaving the cable car, 999 steps sloping nearly 45 degrees become the real test because many people have to bend low to keep climbing. That same opening in the rock has also attracted thrill seekers who have flown through it between the clouds and the cliffs. Along the mountainside, the glass walkway at 4,190 diatri feet is often wet with mist, making every step feel tense. Reaching the summit area, the view changes as the mountaintop becomes quite flat and covered by old forest, standing in contrast to the cliffs below. Jianglong Mountain draws attention even without a long mountain range because 3 sandstone pillars stand separately among the low hills around them. To see this terrain clearly from above, visitors must climb many stone steps carved into the mountainside, and the higher they go, the wider the hills below appear. However, this journey is not easy because the sandstone is quite crumbly and can break off along some parts of the mountain path. This same water-absorbing rock also leaves the cliffs with almost no streams or waterfalls flowing on the surface. Because there is little surface water and roots cannot hold on easily, the red cliffs have almost no trees, creating a clear contrast with the green forest covering the mountain base. On days with thick mist, the base of the mountain is hidden, making the 3 stone pillars look as if they have separated from the ground and are floating in the air. Mount Changbai is covered with white snow for most of the year, but beneath that peaceful look is a large volcano that still holds strong heat. Because of that heat, even though snow and ice cover the mountain for about 9 months each year, hot springs still steam right on the snowy ground. At the summit, the crater holds a very large freshwater lake, 1,224 feet deep, surrounded by steep cliffs. The cliffs rising around the lake are remains from ancient eruptions, which were once strong enough to send ash thousands of miles away to Greenland. From the lake on the summit, the water does not flow straight down the mountainside, but passes through lava tubes before coming out of the cliff as a waterfall. Even more unusual, thick mist covers the area for up to 250 days each year. So many people travel a long way here, but end up seeing only a white wall of fog in front of them. On the summit of Mount Lu, a flat valley sits inside a ring of steep cliffs. From this unusual summit area, many small streams flow to the mountain edge and fall into the valley, forming waterfalls that drop through the clouds. This water and moisture help create mist for nearly 200 days each year, making the mountain scenery disappear and return very quickly. Because of the cool climate and frequent clouds, this place once became a mountain resort with many Western-style villas. Especially in summer, the summit is often about 18 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than the area below. So Mount Lu became a natural place to escape the heat. At sunrise, light passes through the pine forest and the mist, creating thin beams on the ground. The 5 flat peaks, like 5 large stone tabletops, make Mount Wutai stand out among the wide mountain forests of Shanxi, China. Few people know that the rock foundation beneath this place is about 2.5 billion years old, belonging to one of Earth's very ancient rock layers. On that high and wide terrain, hundreds of temples and monasteries sit among the forests, forming a Buddhist complex that stretches along the mountain slopes. Among these buildings, the most notable are wooden structures more than 1,200 years old, still standing thanks to the Dogong bracket system. Because the wooden joints are tightly fitted together, many parts of the buildings can bear weight without using iron nails. Besides its ancient buildings, this place also draws attention for pilgrims who take 3 steps and bow once on the snow, showing their faith in their own way. A massive wall of granite rises straight into the sky, making Mount Hua look like a giant sword tearing through the clouds. At this sacred mountain, physical strength no longer matters if fear defeats the mind first. That terror comes from fractured cliffs, dropping almost vertically at a 90-degree angle, with no gentle slopes to soften the view. Surrounded by an endless sea of fog, the dark stone peaks appear mysterious, almost like deserted islands floating in the air. The real deadly test begins when visitors step onto wooden boards only 12 inches wide, hanging above an empty drop of 6,562 feet. Crossing this path is not only a victory over height, but also the moment humans realise that greatness always comes with fear, loneliness, and a price to pay. Mount Heng stretches across the land like a giant stone wall, forming a natural screen that shields the southern plains. On the steep corridors clinging to the cliff, visitors often have to lower their heads as they walk, turning each step into a quiet reminder of humility before nature. The floating wooden temples are partly built into natural caves, making much of the structure seem hidden deep inside the limestone mountain itself. As in a sea of fog, the cliffside complex appears to cling to the mountain like twisting blue dragons facing the deep empty void. Although the buildings look fragile from below, their true weight is locked into the mountain by oil-soaked pine beams driven deep into the rock. On these dangerous paths, the shared presence of three major religions has turned Mount Heng into a lasting symbol of harmony, patience, and human tolerance. From sea level, the magma mass of Mount Lao rises to 3,714 feet, creating a sharp boundary between rock, sky, and water. Few people would expect that inside this hard stone layer there are very pure underground water sources that later became an important ingredient for a world-famous beer brand. The windy and wave-battered coastal environment turned this place into a Taoist land of practice, where ancient monks chose dangerous rock caves to train their inner calm. After countless storms, many boulders weighing up to 22 million pounds still hang near the cliff edge, resting on only a tiny contact point and creating an unbelievable sense of instability. Its high position beside the sea also makes the mountain act like a natural lightning rod, often struck by lightning and giving the rock surface an even harsher appearance. When temperature differences and a sea of fog appear together, Mount Lao can also create strange optical illusions, making the landscape look like hazy castles floating in midair. Known as the last pure land on Earth, Dao Cheng Yading appears like a forgotten paradise with eternal, snowy peaks rising into the blue sky. The three sacred peaks here are worshipped by local people as the forms of bodhisattvas, creating a sacred and mysterious atmosphere. This place is a harsh test for the body because visitors must face an average height of 13,000 feet and thin mountain air to reach its untouched beauty. So, below the mountain ranges is a system of jade-coloured lakes that changes shades with each stream of sunlight during the day. The landscape creates a strong contrast between the cold white of snow and ice and the bright gold of conifer forests in autumn. In the almost breathless silence, only the wind through the rocks and the sound of a prayer flags echo through the wild mountains. Called the Alps of the East, Sigunyang Mountain stands out with four peaks side by side, and each one has its own shape that catches attention right away. Hidden between deep valleys are lakes that change colour with the seasons and waterfalls that fall from rock walls, creating a quiet but very appealing scene. On the same journey, you can move from wildflower forests to green grasslands and then reach bare limestone and cold glaciers. Charles, the highest peak rises to 20,495 feet, and the name Four Girls Mountain, it comes from a legend about four sisters who became mountains to protect the land. Because of its high, steep ground and many vertical rock faces, climbers see this place as a training ground before taking on bigger challenges. At sunset, the granite cliffs turn bright red, giving the whole mountain a powerful look that also connects with the image of womanhood. In a land that does not seem made for snow, the 13 white peaks of Jade Dragon Snow Mountain curve together like the back of a dragon in the clouds. Because of that, in local culture, this mountain is tied to many love legends, like a sacred border between human life and another world. When the light changes angle, limestone and ice reflect the sun, turning the whole mountain from silver white to pink and then bright gold. More than its strange shape, this mountain mass stretches about 22 miles long and 12 miles wide, making it feel like a giant wall of snow. Even more unusual, it has glaciers at a low latitude, so snow and ice appear close to a much warmer climate zone. Thanks to cable cars, visitors can rise close to 14,800 feet very quickly, but that height can still make them dizzy and short of breath. Namcha Bawa does not look like a gentle mountain mass, but like an ice spear standing in the clouds, making it one of the most mysterious peaks in the world. After 1976, this place once held a frightening title, the highest independent unclimbed mountain in the world, before humans finally reached its summit in 1992. Steep slopes, thick ice, and unstable rockfall make reaching Namcha Barwa dangerous, even though from far away it may look like a silent snow peak. Because thick fog and sudden weather changes often hide it, Many people can wait for a long time and still never see the whole snowy peak. Below the mountain, a major river bends through a deep gorge, making the vertical drop feel so extreme that the peak seems to grow out of a dark abyss. At sunrise, the clouds open layer by layer and golden light sweeps across the snow, creating a rare moment that feels like a reward of luck. The world was once shocked when Mount Gonga was wrongly thought to be taller than Everest, with a mistaken height of 29,500 feet. In the dry stream beds below, tens of thousands of red stones look almost like blood, coloured by tiny algae on their surface. Even stranger, the glaciers here do not stay still high on the mountain, but move down close to thick green forest. Even though its real height is only about 24,790 feet, the mountain still stands like a giant snow pyramid, surrounded by an ancient spiritual atmosphere. Nearby, close to the freezing ice, geothermal hot springs can reach 194 degrees Fahrenheit and still give off heavy steam. At sunrise or sunset, low sunlight turns the snowy top bright gold, making it stand out above a white sea of clouds. Seen from a distance, three parallel red sandstone pillars make Janglang Mountain resemble the enormous Chinese character Hawan, with three strokes of stone rising above the forest. These pillars originated from layers of sandstone sediment deposited at the bottom of an ancient lake about 135 million years ago. Over time, the iron within the sandstone oxidized, turning the cliffs deep red and making them stand out against the green vegetation covering the mountain's base. Hidden beneath the steep cliffs are the remains of a temple about 1,500 years old, although fires and wars repeatedly damaged the structure. Higher above these ancient remains, the route to the summit continues along about 3,500 stone steps carved directly into the almost vertical cliff. In a sharp contrast to the dense vegetation below, wind and rain have eroded and smoothed the summits, where only a few old pine trees can anchor their roots inside rare cracks in the rock. Once the inspiration for the floating mountains in Avatar, Tianzi Mountain appears like a forest of stone pillars rising through a sea of clouds beside the Bailong elevator, attached to a vertical cliff. Around 300 million years ago, the sandstone that forms these mountains still lay beneath the ocean before water and ice eroded it into thousands of vertical pillars. Although the cliffs contain almost no soil, ancient pine trees still root themselves in narrow cracks and stretch into the open air like bonsai trees hanging in the sky. After rainfall, thick mist covers the valley floor, making the stone peaks look like floating islands above a sea of clouds. Within this untouched landscape, the Bailong elevator is anchored to the cliff by a shaft drilled 505 feet directly into the rock. In less than 2 minutes, the glass cabin rises more than 984 feet, carrying visitors from the valley floor to the summit as the entire stone maze gradually opens below. Around Mount Wudang, many stone peaks lean toward the higher summit in the center, creating the feeling that the whole mountain mass is facing one point. This inward-facing terrain makes the summit the most noticeable part, while the narrow ledges and steep cliffs below create a feeling of separation from the lowlands. From the paths clinging to the cliff walls, visitors can look down into drops more than 3,281 feet deep, right below their feet. The higher it gets, the more clouds and storms appear, making the summit more likely to be struck by lightning and exposed to harsh weather. Because of that, ancient builders did not use wood, but built a gold-covered bronze hall on the summit with hundreds of tons of metal to last longer against rain and storms. After each storm, sunlight passes through the sea of clouds, making the bronze roof high above shine among the distant mountain layers. Covered by mist for most of the year, Shan is marked by dozens of granite towers shaped by erosion into stone peaks rising above the clouds. Its fractured terrain and isolated climate turned the mountain into a refuge during the Ice Age, helping preserve more than 2,300 plant species. On the cliffs, organic acids from pine roots slowly weather the granite and create new cracks, helping the trees remain anchored when winds reach 62 miles per hour. For nearly 200 days each year, clouds flow across the ridges and pour into the valleys, forming cloud waterfalls that constantly change shape. At sunset, light reflects across the rock and changes the peaks from grey to gold or purple pink within only a few minutes. This isolation among cliffs and seas of cloud helped protect more than 200 ancient spiritual sites from wars and repeated destruction in the lowlands. Hidden deep among the rugged, snow-covered mountains of Xinjiang, Karnas Lake and Geological Park feels like a separate world cut off from the rest of humanity. In autumn, birch forests turn golden red beside dark green conifers, creating bright layers of colour that reflect across the lake. Its strangest feature is the water, which can change from turquoise to deep blue, silver grey, or milky white with a light weather and mineral content. The isolated mountain terrain also acts like a natural fortress, helping preserve the landscape, wildlife, and many traditional cultural practices. At the centre lies a lake nearly 15 miles long, resting inside a valley carved by ancient glaciers and supplied by melting snow and ice. When thick mist covers the water, sudden dark shapes revive stories of a giant creature that science has never confirmed. Clinging to the dry edge of the Taklamakan Desert, Tarim poplar forest forms a broad green belt in a place where life seems almost impossible. Inside the forest, river channels and small lakes reflect twisted trunks, creating pockets of calm blue water between hot sand and distant dust storms. In autumn, millions of leaves turn gold together, making the forest look like a bright river of light flowing across the grey desert. To survive the extreme dryness, mature trees send deep roots toward groundwater, while young trees may die when the water level falls too far below the surface. These tree belts also hold soil, protect riverbanks and slow-moving sand, forming a natural barrier against the spread of the desert. Yet the golden season lasts only 2 to 3 weeks before cold winds strip the branches and leave the rough trunks exposed across the sand. Seen from a distance, Gwiju Libo Karst looks like a giant green maze, where thousands of sharp limestone peaks rise above rivers and valleys in southern China. At the foot of the mountains, jade green rivers and clear pools flow between grey cliffs, making every bend feel like the entrance to a hidden valley. The area is special because it preserves several types of limestone mountains, helping scientists understand how karst landscapes slowly develop over time. On the steep slopes, trees survive in very thin soil by sending their roots deep into cracks in the rock to find water and nutrients. When rain falls, the water moves underground, enlarges caves and creates hidden rivers that connect different parts of the landscape. This close connection between rock, water, and forest also makes Libo an important home for many rare plants and animals. Rising 10,167 feet above a sea of clouds, Mount Me is one of China's 4 sacred Buddhist mountains and preserves nearly 2,000 years of history. Its rock foundation formed through volcanic activity about 260 million years ago, before time and erosion shaped the steep slopes seen today. The change in elevation creates a temperature difference of up to 36 degrees Fahrenheit and forms 4 climate zones on the same mountain. Within this landscape, China's first Buddhist temple was built in the year 63, turning the mountain into a pilgrimage site for many centuries. At the summit, a gold-plated bronze statue, 157 feet tall and weighing about 727 tons, was divided into sections, transported across steep slopes, and assembled amid fog and thunderstorms. To reach the summit, pilgrims must climb more than 60,000 stone steps over several days, passing through 4 climate zones before entering the Sea of Clouds. Carved deep between giant mountains in Yunnan, Tiger Leaping Gorge ranks among the deepest and most dramatic canyons on Earth, with a river almost disappearing at the bottom. When strong winds lift spray from the rapids, thick mist moves across the cliffs, making the gorge appear clearly one moment and fade into grey-white air the next. The name Tiger Leaping comes from a legend about a tiger that crossed a section of river about 66 feet wide while escaping from hunters. The gorge stretches for about 14 miles, while the surrounding peaks rise nearly 12,800 feet above the river, creating a difference in height that is difficult to imagine. The landscape is still changing because the mountains continue to rise, while the river keeps cutting deeper into the rock below. Low. Cracked cliffs and slopes reaching 50 degrees also mean that heavy rain can quickly trigger falling rocks or landslides inside of the canyon. Linking 13 snowy peaks into the spine of a jade dragon Yulong. Snow Mountain cuts through a sea of clouds above towering grey cliffs. On its steep slopes, ice compressed for tens of thousands of years reflects a cold blue colour beneath the sunlight, resembling blocks of crystal embedded in the mountainside. What makes this glacier system unusual is that it still survives beside a subtropical climate zone at 27 degrees north. Higher above, the summit reaches 18,360 feet, but remains unclimbed because of unstable limestone, steep terrain, and rapidly changing weather. Despite the harsh landscape, melting ice still moves through the rock to form underground streams that supply the canals of an ancient city more than 800 years old below the mountain. Yet over 20 years, climate change has reduced the glacier area by 60%, while the ice continues to thin by about 3 feet each year. On Mount Putuo, the temple bells do not ring in silence but mix with the sound of waves around the island. From a distance, the island looks like the remaining tip of an ancient mountain range after its lower parts were surrounded by the sea. Although the highest peak is only about 955 feet, the rock foundation below drops deep into the sea, making Mount Putuo look as if it rises straight from the water. Near the edge of the sea, a bronze statue weighing about 154,324 pounds faces the waves, becoming the clearest landmark among rock, wind, and water. However, the sea around it does not make the ecosystem easier to survive in, because the cracks in the rocks hold very little fresh water. In those dry and salty conditions, the forest still holds onto the rocky slopes, sitting between cliffs and strips of golden sand near the sea. Stretching 497 miles between the frozen plateau and the dry desert, the Kilian Mountains form an icy fortress that stores the water, keeping the entire region alive. From the high peaks, melting ice flows into the rainless land below, feeding rivers and gathering in low-lying areas. Thanks to this water, a chain of green oases formed, once helping merchant caravans and camels survive along the Silk Road. In summer, yaks, horses, and sheep graze among bright wildflowers while snow and ice still cover the higher slopes. Higher on the rocky ground, snow leopards blend so closely into the landscape that they seem to disappear before an observer's eyes. Deep beneath the surface lies permafrost storing ancient carbon, which could be released into the atmosphere if the frozen ground continues to thaw. Covered by mist for most of the year, Sankingshan is marked by dozens of granite towers shaped by erosion into stone peaks rising above the clouds. Its fractured terrain and isolated climate turned the mountain into a refuge during the Ice Age, helping preserve more than 2,000 300 plant species. On the cliffs, organic acids from pine roots slowly weather the granite and create new cracks, helping the trees remain anchored when winds reach 62 miles per hour. For nearly 200 days each year, clouds flow across the ridges and pour into the valleys, forming cloud waterfalls that constantly change shape. At sunset, light reflects across the rock and changes the peaks from grey to gold or purple pink within only a few minutes. This isolation among cliffs and seas of cloud helped protect more than 200 ancient spiritual sites from wars and repeated destruction in the lowlands. Spread across the desert like the surface of another planet, Yadin National Geological Park is a vast maze shaped by wind and sand over about 700,000 years. Uneven erosion has carved old lake sediments into forms resembling ships, fortresses, and walled cities floating above the sand. As you move deeper, repeating walls and passages make distance hard to judge, so even experienced travelers can quickly lose their sense of direction. Few visitors realize these hard formations began as layers of mud, clay, and fine sand left behind by ancient lakes before the region dried out. Long ridges, castle-like blocks, and isolated pillars show different points in the erosion process as the wind slowly strips them down over time. At sunset, the grey and gold stone turns red and orange, making the desert look like an ancient city on fire. Arranged like hundreds of honeycomb openings along a sandstone cliff 1.2 miles long, the Mogao Caves hide a colourful world of art behind a dry rock face. In the darkness, ancient artists stood on scaffolding beneath oil lamps, creating more than 4,000 flying figures with ribbons that appear to move. Inside a narrow chamber, a statue rising 116 feet forces visitors to look upward, making them feel small before its enormous scale. Deeper inside, a secret library sealed for 900 years once held 50,000 ancient documents like a preserved time machine. Yet this treasure is extremely fragile because the statues were made from mud around wooden frames, while wind-blown sand continually erodes the sandstone cliff. Today, the heat and carbon dioxide produced by 40 visitors in only 10 minutes can change the temperature and humidity inside the caves, causing thousand-year-old colours to deteriorate. Unlike connected mountain ranges, Guilin rises from the plain as tens of thousands of separate limestone towers. On the rivers winding between their bases, fishermen still preserve a tradition thousands of years old by using diving cormorants to catch fish instead of nets. A greater secret lies underground, where water has carved a network of caves and empty spaces occupying more than 40% of the limestone formations. This underground world formed through hundreds of millions of years of tectonic movement, fracturing and erosion within a limestone layer up to 9,843 feet thick. Above this hidden world, the river lies flat like a mirror, reflecting limestone towers and boats, while almost erasing the boundary between sky and water. The river, curving between these stone pillars, became so famous that it was printed on the 20 yuan banknote, becoming a familiar image across China. Hidden deep among the rugged, snow-covered mountains of Xinjiang, Canis Lake and Geological Park feels like a separate world cut off from the rest of humanity. In autumn, birch forests turn gold and red beside dark green conifers, creating bright layers of colour that reflect across the lake. Its strangest feature is the water, which can change from turquoise to deep blue, silver grey, or milky white with a light weather and mineral content. The isolated mountain terrain also acts like a natural fortress, helping preserve the landscape, wildlife, and many traditional cultural practices. At the centre lies a lake nearly 15 miles long, resting inside a valley carved by ancient glaciers and supplied by melting snow and ice. When thick mist covers the water, sudden dark shapes revive stories of a giant creature that science has never confirmed. Thousands of poems and ancient characters cover the cliffs of Mount Tai, turning the mountain into a giant stone book through many ages. These carved marks make Mount Tai more than a natural landscape, because it has also become a cultural symbol shown on the back of the national banknote. To reach the summit, visitors must climb more than 7,200 stone steps, which become steeper as they go higher and look as if they lead straight into the clouds. Along that mountain path are huge granite blocks, hard, bare and solid, creating Mount Tai's own heavy and powerful appearance. Even more special, the ancient rock core of the mountain has existed for about 3 billion years, almost reaching back to a very early period of Earth. At dawn, sunlight passes through the mist and turns those ancient rocks red, making the summit glow like hot coal.
Jade Dragon Snow Mountain. Known as a great climate paradox, Jade Dragon Snow Mountain is the perpetual glacier located closest to the equator in the entire northern hemisphere. At an altitude of 14,764 feet, oxygen drops by 40%, turning every breath into painful torture and forcing the heart rate to race, even when an explorer stands completely still. That harshness, combined with fragile limestone cliffs, has protected the glory of the 18,360-foot peak, turning it into an undefeated fortress without a single human footprint. The entire mountain range winds for 22 miles like a jade dragon, embracing thousand-year-old ice layers compressed so tightly that they only radiate a magical sapphire light. The most spectacular scene bursts open during 10 minutes of sunrise, when sunlight directly strikes the snow peaks and lights up the entire fierce dragon into a blazing block of solid gold.
Known for the phenomenon of bodhisattva flesh bodies, Juhua Mountain draws attention because the bodies of some monks have not decayed after many centuries. What makes it even more special is that from certain angles, The outline of the whole mountain range forms the shape of a giant reclining Buddha. When mist and clouds sink low and cover the valleys, the peaks appear like islands resting in a white layer of cloud. The geology of this place is a granite mass about 100 million years old, worn down over time into the image of 99 peaks like 99 lotus flowers. Juhua Mountain also preserves a Buddhist scripture said to have been written by a monk using blood mixed with gold powder over 20 years. To explore this place, visitors must walk through tens of thousands of bluestone steps once carved and carried up by mountain workers centuries ago. Imagine looking down into a quiet valley and seeing Quandixia village rise like a stone gold ingot on the mountainside. Strangely, it kept its old shape not because it was protected from the beginning, but because it was once too poor and too remote to be modernised. At sunset, the light turns the grey stone gold, while the lower alleys darken fast, making the whole village change colour in just minutes. Once inside, you do not find flat streets, but rough stone lanes, steep steps, and narrow paths shaped by the slope. With more than 400 years of history, the village was once tied to trade routes, merchants, and horse caravans stopping in the mountains. Today, many original families still share the Han surname, but younger people have left, leaving elders to watch over this slow and lonely piece of history. On Mount Baishi, thousands of white stone peaks stand close together like a stone forest that once lay under the ocean. Traces of marine fossils still found on some peaks show that this mountain mass was once formed in a water environment. After being lifted, cracked and eroded over a long period, the rock layer was divided into narrow peaks, steep walls and deep valleys. Because there is very little soil, many small plants have to grow from cracks in the rock, hold tightly to the cliffs and take minerals from the stone to survive. From those deep valleys, moisture rises into mist, making the peaks appear like islands on a sea of clouds. At about 6,562 feet, the glass walkways and steep stairs let visitors see the beauty of the mountain while feeling the depth right beneath their feet. Around Mount Wudang, many stone peaks lean toward the higher summit in the center, creating the feeling that the whole mountain mass is facing one point. This inward-facing terrain makes the summit the most noticeable part, while the narrow ledges and steep cliffs below create a feeling of separation from the lowlands. From the paths clinging to the cliff walls, visitors can look down into drops more than 3,281 feet deep, right below their feet. The higher it gets, the more clouds and storms appear, making the summit more likely to be struck by lightning and exposed to harsh weather. Because of that, ancient builders did not use wood, but built a gold-covered bronze hall on the summit with hundreds of tons of metal to last longer against rain and storms. After each storm, sunlight passes through the sea of clouds, making the bronze roof high above shine among the distant mountain layers. Layering brightly coloured sandstone like a giant multi-layered cake, Jangga Dangxia makes the desert look like a landscape from another world. This palette began forming more than 24 million years ago, when mud, sandstone and minerals settled at the bottom of an ancient lake and slowly hardened. Later, tectonic pressure lifted and folded the rock layers into giant waves through the same geological process that once raised the Himalayas. Over millions of years, sand-filled winds and rare rainfall carved the surface into steep cliffs, narrow cracks, and stone towers across land with almost no vegetation. After this terrain had taken shape, camel caravans travelling along the Silk Road passed beneath slopes that looked as if they were burning. Only in the early 2000s, when photographs spread around the world, did many people notice this place. Yet some still believed its unreal colours were the result of digital editing. Across a sandstone hillside, stretching more than half a mile, chambers opened by time expose the giant Buddhist statues of the Yungang grottos directly to sunlight. More than 1,500 years ago, the Northern Wei dynasty mobilized tens of thousands of stoneworkers for 30 years, turning the cliff into a symbol of faith and royal power. Because the site stood along an ancient trade route, Greek, Indian, and Eastern art blended together, creating faces with high noses, deep-set eyes, and robes with flowing folds. These influences appear most clearly on statues rising up to 56 feet, making anyone standing below look like a tiny dot. Although winter temperatures outside can fall to -4 degrees Fahrenheit, the deeper chambers remain more stable, reducing temperature changes and slowing the deterioration of the stone. Over many centuries, earthquakes caused several cave ceilings to collapse, burying thousands of ancient artworks beneath layers of broken rock. Spread across the desert, like the surface of another planet, Yarden National Geological Park is a vast maze shaped by wind and sand over about 700,000 years. Uneven erosion has carved old lake sediments into forms resembling ships, fortresses, and walled cities floating above the sand. As you move deeper, repeating walls and passages make distance hard to judge, so even experienced travellers can quickly lose their sense of direction. Few visitors realise these hard formations began as layers of mud, clay and fine sand left behind by ancient lakes before the region dried out. Long ridges, castle-like blocks, and isolated pillars show different points in the erosion process as the wind slowly strips them down over time. At sunset, the grey and gold stone turns red and orange, making the desert look like an ancient city on fire. Seen from a distance, Gwiju, Libo Karst, looks like a giant green maze, where thousands of sharp limestone peaks rise above rivers and valleys in southern China. At the foot of the mountains, jade green rivers and clear pools flow between grey cliffs, making every bend feel like the entrance to a hidden valley. The area is special because it preserves several types of limestone mountains, helping scientists understand how karst landscapes slowly develop over time. On the steep slopes, trees survive in very thin soil by sending their roots deep into cracks in the rock to find water and nutrients. When rain falls, the water moves underground, enlarges caves and creates hidden rivers that connect different parts of the landscape. This close connection between rock, water, and forest also makes Libo an important home for many rare plants and animals. Carved deep between giant mountains in Yunnan, Tiger Leaping Gorge ranks among the deepest and most dramatic canyons on Earth, with a river almost disappearing at the bottom. When strong winds lift spray from the rapids, thick mist moves across the cliffs, making the gorge appear clearly one moment and fade into grey-white air the next. The name Tiger Leaping comes from a legend about a tiger that crossed a section of river about 66 feet wide while escaping from hunters. The gorge stretches for about 14 miles, while the surrounding peaks rise nearly 12,800 feet above the river, creating a difference in height that is difficult to imagine. The landscape is still changing because the mountains continue to rise, while the river keeps cutting deeper into the rock below. Low. Cracked cliffs and slopes reaching 50 degrees also mean that heavy rain can quickly trigger falling rocks or landslides inside of the canyon. Hidden among forested mountains, the massive rammed earth Fuji and Tulu were once mistaken by Western satellite analysts for secret military structures. Beyond the plain outer shell, the wooden interior suddenly opens like a bright ancient arena, instantly shocking the eye. The lively courtyard can hold 600 to 800 people of the same bloodline, living as a self-governed community behind a single main gate. The earthen armour around them is made from clay, sticky rice soup, and egg white, then hardens almost like reinforced concrete. To stop bandits from breaking in, the two lowest floors are almost completely sealed, leaving no windows for outsiders to reach. The silent cylindrical structure also spreads the force of wind and tremors, helping many buildings stand through earthquakes as strong as magnitude 7. Carved across a riverside cliff, stretching 3,280 feet, more than 2,300 caves and worship niches make the Longmen grottos resemble a giant stone honeycomb. Over more than 400 years, ancient craftsmen carved more than 100,000 Buddhist statues into the limestone, from figures only 1 inch tall to a giant statue rising over 56 feet. The contrast becomes striking as the giant statue smiles down while tens of thousands of smaller figures crowd the surrounding niches. The statue is also believed to carry the facial features of an empress who once used money reserved for cosmetics to help fund the project. Yet thousands of statues across the cliffs remain without heads or arms, bearing the marks of warfare, looting, and campaigns against religion. Today, air pollution and acid rain continue to erode the limestone, making thousand-year-old carvings increasingly difficult to recognize. Hidden deep among the rugged, snow-covered mountains of Xinjiang, Canis Lake and Geological Park feels like a separate world cut off from the rest of humanity. In autumn, birch forests turn gold and red beside dark green conifers, creating bright layers of colour that reflect across the lake. Its strangest feature is the water, which can change from turquoise to deep blue, silver grey, or milky white with a light weather and mineral content. The isolated mountain terrain also acts like a natural fortress, helping preserve the landscape, wildlife, and many traditional cultural practices. At the centre lies a lake nearly 15 miles long, resting inside a valley carved by ancient glaciers and supplied by melting snow and ice. When thick mist covers the water, sudden dark shapes revive stories of a giant creature that science has never confirmed. Stretching 497 miles between the frozen plateau and the dry desert, the Kilian Mountains form an icy fortress that stores the water, keeping the entire region alive. From the high peaks, melting ice flows into the rainless land below, feeding rivers and gathering in low-lying areas. Thanks to this water, a chain of green oases formed, once helping merchant caravans and camels survive along the Silk Road. In summer, yaks, horses, and sheep graze among bright wildflowers while snow and ice still cover the higher slopes. Higher on the rocky ground, snow leopards blend so closely into the landscape that they seem to disappear before an observer's eyes. Deep beneath the surface lies permafrost storing ancient carbon, which could be released into the atmosphere if the frozen ground continues to thaw. Linking 13 snowy peaks into the spine of a jade dragon Yulong. Snow Mountain cuts through a sea of clouds above towering grey cliffs. On its steep slopes, ice compressed for tens of thousands of years reflects a cold blue colour beneath the sunlight, resembling blocks of crystal embedded in the mountainside. What makes this glacier system unusual is that it still survives beside a subtropical climate zone at 27 degrees north. Higher above, the summit reaches 18,360 feet, but remains unclimbed because of unstable limestone, steep terrain, and rapidly changing weather. Despite the harsh landscape, melting ice still moves through the rock to form underground streams that supply the canals of an ancient city more than 800 years old below the mountain. Yet over 20 years, climate change has reduced the glacier area by 60%, while the ice continues to thin by about 3 feet each year. Unlike connected mountain ranges, Guilin rises from the plain as tens of thousands of separate limestone towers. On the rivers winding between their bases, fishermen still preserve a tradition thousands of years old by using diving cormorants to catch fish instead of nets. A greater secret lies underground, where water has carved a network of caves and empty spaces occupying more than 40% of the limestone formations. This underground world formed through hundreds of millions of years of tectonic movement, fracturing, and erosion within a limestone layer up to 9,843 feet thick. Above this hidden world, the river lies flat like a mirror, reflecting limestone towers and boats, while almost erasing the boundary between sky and water. The river, curving between these stone pillars, became so famous that it was printed on the 20 yuan banknote, becoming a familiar image across China.